Hello, I'm Sumi Somaskanda, and we're coming to you from Washington at this hour because we have breaking news for you. Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he will be indicted for a third time. He called it, quote, another fake indictment and an attempt to interfere in the 2024 presidential election campaign being led by a deranged prosecutor. Those are his words, as you see there in the statement. There's been a lot of speculation that an indictment over Trump's alleged interference in the 2020 presidential election and his role in the January 6th riot is imminent. No other sitting or former U.S. president has ever been indicted on criminal charges. And for Donald Trump, this is potentially his third time in just 4 months. He's already due to stand trial next year in 2 separate cases. All the while, according to opinion polls, he remains the outstanding favorite to win the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election. He's repeatedly said he will run for the White House, even if he is convicted, even if he is jailed. So let's go live now to former Republican National Committee official Doug Heye, who's standing by for us. Doug, you have been following all the latest developments with us here, and we're seeing there's a lot happening in the courtroom here in Washington at the moment. The latest that we're hearing is that the grand jury has just returned a sealed indictment. The judge has approved a summons of an unnamed individual to appear in court. But just take us through what we're expecting to see here.
Well, we're expecting to see the Department of Justice indict Donald Trump. This is now, another indictment. It seems that they're stacking up on him. And what we saw with his statement is that he says it's a fake indictment. Obviously, the indictment is a very real thing. We'll find out if he's innocent or guilty if he's charged. But the indictment is very real. It increases the legal pressure that Donald Trump finds himself, but in the short term does not, bizarrely, increase the political pressure that he feels himself under. In fact, he's the one who told us that this was going to happen. He released a statement earlier today on his platform, Truth Social, essentially so he could get out in advance of this and also, as he's done very well on this, raise money and shore up his Republican base. Very bizarre things that happen. Typically, when a politician is indicted, they're in big trouble politically and legally. With Trump, he is at least in the short term suspending some of the political laws of gravity here.
And Doug, just to remind our viewers, this is all linked to the federal investigation into efforts to undermine the 2020 election results. Remind us of what exactly Jack Smith, the special counsel, and his office have been looking at.
Right. Well, first and foremost, Jack Smith is a special counsel. So he's been appointed specifically to look into these events that surrounded Donald Trump's trying to overturn the election. He's not a Biden administration employee. He's not the attorney general, for instance. This is an independent investigation that it looks like has concluded that Donald Trump broke the law. Typically, if you're a special counsel or a prosecutor, you don't file a charge unless you think you have a very good chance of finding that person has committed a crime and will be found guilty. And so what they've done is they've talked to seemingly every person that they could in the administration, in the state of Georgia, for instance, as well, who have had conversations with Donald Trump on trying to overturn the election and on the events surrounding January 6th. That includes former Vice President Pence, his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and on down the line of anybody who was privy to Donald Trump's words, actions, or thoughts in those days.
Okay, Doug, I want you to stay right there. We're going to talk about some of those other investigations, but I want to bring in our correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, who's standing just in front of the courthouse for us right here in Washington, D.C., not so far from where we're sitting, covering all of this for us. And Nomia, I understand that we have just received the indictment. Is that correct?
Yes, we have just received it. I'm just looking at it now. This has come through the United States of America versus Donald J. Trump, and on it we've got 4 counts that he's been charged with. So just to confirm, Donald Trump has been indicted for the 3rd time. So the count 1 is conspiracy to defraud the United States, witness tampering, and conspiracy against rights of citizens. So these are the charges that he was predicted to be facing. But let me just quickly explain what they mean. So, this is the biggest case, first of all, against Donald Trump by the Department of Justice. They are investigating a variety of plots in relation to the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th, 2021, and the attack itself. And there's a few plots that they are looking into, but the charges themselves, so obstruction, the conspiracy to defraud the United States, this is likely to relate to schemes like the false electors plot. So this was this is an accusation that Donald Trump is accused of devising with his lawyers and advisors to try and overturn the election results by installing fake electors in a key number of states. The other charge here is witness tampering. We'll have to go through the document a bit more carefully, Sumi. Obviously, we've just received it to understand exactly what the context is of that. The conspiracy against rights of citizens, this is a really interesting one. And this is based on a federal civil rights statute. It actually was passed during the Reconstruction era to protect the voting rights of former enslaved people, black people in the South. So that's quite an interesting one. But look, overall, let me just read this also coming from the indictment. These claims of election fraud were false, and the defendant knew that they were false. So this is the case that the Department of Justice is laying out against Donald Trump. Just to remind, this is the biggest case against Donald Trump by the Department of Justice. It's arguably the most serious indictment yet. If you remember the first indictment in New York, allegations of falsifying business documents, that was to do with before he became president. The second indictment back in June, just last month, in July, this was to do with classified documents, and this was after he left the White House. This indictment, the third one, is related to what he did when he was president. And we know that Donald Trump has already been reacting. He reacted before this indictment was handed down, and saying exactly what he said in the last two indictments, that this is a political witch hunt, that this is the Department of Justice, which has been weaponized by President Biden to stop him from running for the White House. And of course, Donald Trump is innocent until proven guilty. Those are his rights. But it is extraordinary that the former president of the USA, potentially the future president again, has now been indicted for the third time.
Extraordinary and historic indeed. And Nomi, I do want to give you some time to pour through this indictment. We've all just received it, but just give us an idea as you're standing outside of that courthouse. We have been waiting really over the last week and a half or 2 weeks, ever since the former president said he received this target letter indicating that he was the target of an indictment in this investigation. We've been waiting to see what the grand jury does here. So what has been happening there today? What's it been like?
So there's been a build-up, really, hasn't there? The fact is that we only know about these imminent indictments because of Donald Trump. He has done this twice before. He tends to try and get ahead of the narrative or control the narrative in order to try and work it to his favor. And we know that it works in his favor, certainly with Republican voters and his base. And so when he announced that there was this target letter that he had received, he told us that he received it on he got it on a Sunday, but he told us about it on his social network site on the Tuesday. And this target letter is usually sent to people who are being investigated. It's usually sent for them to give evidence to the jury. He was invited to give evidence, which he declined, and he declined that in the last two indictments as well. But usually those target letters are sent, as I said, to defendants, to people who are being investigated when the investigation is wrapping up. So we knew that something was coming. And there's been, lots of activity in the court over the last week or so, the grand jury coming in and out. We know they come in on a Tuesday and a Thursday. They had left earlier, but we know the foreperson had stayed. So there has been this real kind of sense that this indictment was coming. And as I mentioned, because Donald Trump has largely been very open about it. It's him that has almost been telling us when this is coming. But we have now confirmed, and I would say it's come a lot sooner, because last time Donald Trump announced that he was being indicted, it came the next day. Today he said that he heard that he was being indicted, and within an hour or two we've got that confirmation from the special counsel Jack Smith that he is going to be indicted for the third time. And as I said, arguably the most serious case against Donald Trump yet.
Indeed, and we're just seeing information coming into us, Nomia, that the arraignment will be in Washington, D.C. this Thursday at 4 p.m. So we can imagine just what kind of arrangements that Washington itself will have to make in preparation for this arraignment, similar to what we saw in Miami for the previous federal indictment, and also in New York for the indictment there as well. But I think we have some images of the actual indictment that we can bring up. Of course, this is a lot to read through, and everyone will not be able to pour through this just on the screen here, but just interesting to look at, as we mentioned here, 4 charges that the former president is facing here. These 4 charges that you'll see on your screen here: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. And I want to bring back Doug Heye, because, Doug, we were just talking before we learned the news of this indictment, so I want to get your reaction on what we've actually seen come down.
Well, I think we knew that this was coming. Trump obviously sort of jump-started the time frame on when we could expect this. But this is what everyone has been keeping their eyes on for weeks now. There was a real sentiment in Washington that this was going to happen last week. Well, now that it's happened, we now know on Thursday that we'll see the arraignment. And we use the word unprecedented when it comes to Donald Trump so often, but this may be the most unprecedented that we have. We've never seen this in the United States, where a former president's been tried with a crime, certainly not a felony from the Department of Justice. And so what we're going to see at the courthouse on Thursday, we talk about prominent trials, we talk about a circus atmosphere around them, and around a lot of things that Donald Trump says and does. That'll be never more true than what we see on Thursday. We'll see him leaving to go to Washington. We'll see him arriving in whichever airport he flies into around Washington. We'll see him going to the courtroom. And these are images that we've never seen in the United States before.